All right, folks, let's get started. The second session of the day, which is going to be held by Rotem from vixx. Rotem is going to be talking about Detox, the unobtainable test stability, or is it? So, quick introduction on Rotem. So, Rotem is a software engineer and open source advocate. Is passionate about Android, React Native, mobile performance, writing dev tools, and Lego. In his current position at vixx, Rotem is leading a team working on Detox and a few other infrastructure and testing tools. Rotem will be talking about Detox, a gray box testing solution for mobile apps, how they fight flakiness, best practices, and their strive for zero manual QA. All right, Rotem, over to you.
Thank you very much for the introduction. Okay, so let's dive right in. So hi everyone, and I'll start a bit with the motivation for this talk. Detox is a gray box testing solution for mobile applications, and it manages the synchronization between the test code and the app, so the users don't have to do it manually. And despite eliminating test code and despite eliminating the user's need to do so, and abundant documentation and guides, developers and testers are still get tripped on usage patterns, misconfiguration, and suffer from poor test stability. We know because we feel that every day, either with GitHub issues or internal usage of developers at vixx. This talk aims to explain how vixx is using Detox internally and how we manage configuration, how we fight flakiness, and some of the best practices we've developed over the 3 or 4 years we've been building and using Detox in our CI process. We'll discuss our endless strive towards zero manual QA, which always seems in reach if we only overcome the last technical hurdle, the last thing that we just found out that is making life hard. So hi, I'm Rotem. I'm a software engineer working at vixx. In the past 4 years, I have been working on Detox since its inception. In the past 2.5 years, I led the team behind Detox, and recently I left this role in order to join vixx's server infrastructure group. In the picture, you can see me with two of my favorite side projects, especially now between lockdowns. In order to get everything into the right context, we'll start at the beginning. Detox was built at vixx in order to solve a growing problem of flaky end-to-end tests, especially in our then new React Native application. The main idea was to follow the approach successfully executed by Espresso and Earl Grey, two gray box testing projects created by Google for Android and iOS, respectively. As opposed to black box testing, when the tester needs to decide how much time they wait for the app to finish finish what it's doing before sending the next action or expectation, the gray box approach includes running synchronization mechanism inside the app under a test. So it runs in the same process of the app. And it detects busyness and idleness of the process and only interacts with the app when it is considered idle, meaning that it has no more events to handle, no more network requests, no more animations, no more transitions, is completely idle. And this approach guarantees that any action and expectation with the app will only happen when it's finished processing everything, and nothing will change anymore until the next user action. Or, of course, the next action that Detox does. And so in order for us to talk about how we incorporate end-to-end testing at vixx, let's discuss how vixx's mobile application is architected. In a bird's eye view, there are 4 types of parts which we build the app from. The first is the engine. This is the backbone of the application. And it's an entity that includes all the native app code. It has an API registry for modules that are built on top of it so that they can communicate and with it and with one another. The infrastructure libraries used in the engine, most of which we open source, and the engine itself are usually written in languages native to the platform, alongside unified JavaScript API. So they're written in Swift and Objective-C for iOS, and Java, and some Kotlin for Android. The second type is our UI library, aka React Native UI lib. We open sourced this one. It's open source and it's maintained as an open source project. So all of our UI is built on top of it. It includes both JavaScript and native components for both iOS and Android, and usually have a unified API. A module, this is the third type, it's a single product. Let's say it might be a blog, a store management, CRM, chat, any kind of product like this, and it's exposing an API of itself and consumes APIs of the engine and of other modules, of course, and UI lib and everything else that can be used. So we have more than 30 modules inside the application. The modules are the actual product implementation. Here, most of the screens and business logics are defined. And the fourth type is other libraries, opened or closed source. And these somewhat disconnected from our release process, and they are inherently just transitive dependencies of one of the above mentioned parts. So new releases are being updated manually, mostly through pull requests to the engine, UI lib, or module. And regarding testing, they're being treated separately, and they have their own suites of tests. So each of these parts has its own independent CI process. And when everything looks good, a new version can be published for everyone to use. The final stage is to take all of those and all of the above and build them in one big binary that includes everything. This is the app we release to the stores at the end of the process. So now that we have a slight overview on how everything is laid out, let's discuss testing. I will not discuss unit tests here, though every project has its own elaborate unit test suite, which runs all the time, mostly because they're very, very cheap to run, and it's good practice. On the end-to-end end, funny, we differentiate between a few types of tests, and we can split those test suites and execution timing to different stages of the development cycles. Here are 4 types of end-to-end tests that we do internally. So the first one is production end-to-end. Those are fully functional app, mostly, with very minimal mocking. Wix uses experiment and A/B testing quite extensively, and with this type of tests, we want to make sure that we get the same features, our A/B tests, on every test execution. So we developed an experiment override mechanism that enables configuration of a predefined experiment blob at the beginning of every test. This launches the app with these experiments running, and thus ensuring that we never get different behavior while the app is under a test. So it doesn't get different experiments every time. It just gets the same experiments on every test run. Production end-to-end tests run whenever a module owner wants to GA or publish their work into the full app. So it takes everything, it wraps everything around and runs an extensive production end-to-end test with the new version of the module and the same version of everything else, and just wants to make sure that that everything works as expected. The second type is mocked end-to-end. These tests use mocked server endpoints and do not interact with production environment at all. This controls the mock server's output and tests the module's behavior in some predefined tests. The big upside is the ability to control all inputs of these tests. We have mock servers, and we can control all the states of those servers. And we know that we won't have network issues because everything is done locally on the machine that runs the tests. So this has consistent inputs with local mock servers, and this guarantees consistent outputs. This is usually more stable and a bit faster than production end-to-end. This runs in CI on every push to the module's code base. So every module has its own code base, its own Git repo, if you like. Whenever they push something, they have their own CI process that runs those specific tests. The third is screenshot testing, mostly used in our shared UI library. That's the UI lib I spoke about. Detox doesn't have any sort of screenshot comparison mechanism, but it can take screenshots on demand. So we have both device level screenshots, which takes the screenshot of the whole screen, and element level screenshot, which takes a specific element, like you see on the right, to be compared with external library. So we use Applitools in order to get smarter comparisons and avoid false positives on slight pixel variations. And I want to add a note here. So it's worth mentioning that slight pixel variations is not an uncommon issue. So it can happen by comparing screenshots taken with two different graphic cards even, or different drivers. For instance, so a local dev machine where you create the baseline screenshot, and if you compare it to the one that is created in CI, they can have slight variations that can cause false positives and just fail without you understanding why. The third is component testing. Some of the modules internally incorporate testing on actual React component states by only loading the component themselves and switching state and props programmatically throughout the test. This is being done on top of Detox with Compot, which is another open source project that Wix maintains. This is our React Native component testing library. This runs in CI on every push on the module's code base, just like mocked end-to-end. So Wix application modules are written 100% with JavaScript and TypeScript. And this means that most of the module's business logic runs the same code on two platforms. And a lot of times, product developers, when they find a bug related to their module, and if it manifests on both platforms similarly, and when the bug manifests only in one platform, this is usually an issue that of the infrastructure library and not of the module itself. This means that module devs are able to get pretty good coverage by only running end-to-end tests on one platform. This does not, however, mean that the whole app can be tested on one platform. All of Wix's infrastructure libraries are running tests on both iOS and Android. In order for us to be able to trust end-to-ends, they must be very stable, but also they must provide good insight of what happened when a test fails. So over the years, we try to improve this in two ways. The first is by developing a series of tools to help us figure out things like view hierarchy dumps, trace logs, videos, test timeline graphs that shows how the tests were executed in real time. And we're also trying to make it easier for the user to understand why tests hang when they do. And this happens quite a lot. And this is usually caused by the app not being able to get into idle state, because Detox must wait for an idle state to interact with the app. So this might happen due to a network request that never ends, or an infinite animation, or some kind of infinite loop. The second is education, and the latter was mostly directed internally at Wix engineering team, but some is also reached our documentation or my Medium. You can find it on my Medium, on Wix engineering Medium. There's a lot of good stuff there. Okay, so again, let's talk about stable end-to-end tests. So there are mostly two rules for stable tests. The first is test isolation, and this is probably one of the most important tips I can give you here. Make sure that every test is starting fresh. Make sure that it's not dependent on execution of previous tests. This is critical. The second one is input consistency, and this one is also critical, of course. So an app might have multiple inputs that might change the behavior when it's running. So various responses from servers. Some application might have experiments or A/B tests running and executing different code paths in the app, causing it to behave differently during different runs. You must make sure that these are handled and configured to be identical throughout all iterations of the test. Whenever it's locally or in CI, it doesn't matter. And you want to make sure that whatever you run locally runs exactly the same in CI. At Wix, we have developed an experiment override mechanism that configures a predefined experiment blob in the app, and it ensures that we never get different behavior while the app is under test. So configuration is also very important for us. As Detox becomes more mature and gets more features and tighter integration with Jest, usually in order to leverage some features available in Jest. This is our recommended test runner for Detox. So configuration becomes harder to handle. And although the documentation is pretty good, it's very hard to keep track on the changes of the config, and it's a big hassle. So as mentioned before, Wix app is built on many independently developed modules, and each has its own Git project and build configuration and CI. And each of these are required. Each of these was required to add Detox configuration files into its repo, and most of them are similar, have similar config files. So during the last 8 months, we've come to a realization that it makes zero sense to keep it that way, to just copy and paste everything on 30 or 40 different modules. And we went for a unified configuration for everything. The configuration files are an extremely important yet fragile part of Detox. It is easily easy to misconfigure them. And then you can get subpar experience and think that Detox is not that good, but that's not the case. So for those reasons, we have decided to supply some sort of basic shareable configuration right out of the box. So sometime in the near future, we're still working on this, and this is something we have already started using internally. So CI for mobile is one of those things that are still pretty hard to nail out of the box with the out-of-the-box solutions. We've tried all the major SaaS CI solutions. Running iOS end-to-end on either Circle CI, Travis CI, or Bitrise is pretty easy. The big problem is the Android emulators. The real insight here is that Android emulators work better on Mac VMs than they do on the offered Linux ones. And because they are guaranteed to run on nested virtualization machines, which is required for running an x86 emulator. So just to explain it, we basically run a VM, the Android x86 emulator, inside a VM, the Mac OS machine that they provide to us. So it's a VM inside a VM. That's why we need nested virtualization. But all of those still miss hardware acceleration and resulting with poor emulator performance. So our current solution in our in-house CI includes VMware ESXi on Mac Pros on Mac Stadium with Mac OS VMs. This works on both iOS and Android, as VMware supports nested virtualization and it works okay. But performance of those machines is still pretty bad. Compilation time is slow, and the test parallelization, which means running Detox on multiple devices at the same time, is somewhat limited. So our next gen setup includes bare metal Mac Minis, such that run everything on the host OS. These have much better performance, at least 2x faster than the VMs on an Intel-based Mac Mini. So hopefully we'll get it faster, even faster with a Mac Mini with the M1 chip, or a faster chip whenever it comes out. On Android emulator front, we recently released support for GeniCloud SAS, the device orchestration with Detox. And by using GeniCloud emulators, we gain 4 key benefits. The first is we drop all prerequisites from the CI machines, as the emulators run remotely on GeniCloud infrastructure. So we can run it on every machine that we want. It can be a very slow machine, it doesn't really matter. The first is better performance per individual emulator. In our case, we decreased a 35-minute suite with 2 workers running Android emulators to 15 minutes. So 35 to 15 with the same amount of workers, but those 2 workers running on GeniCloud instead of running on the machine itself. And maybe the biggest benefit is the ability to scale infinitely. So run as many workers as we want in parallel. So instead of running those 2, we can run 5 and then get everything and get all those tests that took 35 minutes in 5 minutes. And all our SAS CI options now become valid. So we can now use Bitrise or Circle CI or whatever, because they can be used to build and test and run the test orchestration, but offload device emulation to GeniCloud. And so, but the main caveat of GeniCloud, of course, is the fact that it's a paid service, even for open source projects. So, zero manual QA. The holy grail of our release process is to have it all automated and fast. And as we continue to solve our problems, we get just a bit closer to that goal on each and every step. And the main issue we're facing today is the test execution speed in CI, especially with the elaborate production end-to-end suites. We have a lot of them, and it takes time. So the absurd is that it's faster for our QA engineers to go over the test suite and run them manually than wait for 150 minutes for them to finish. So that's what they do. But this will not stay this way for long, though. With just a bit more work, we'll get much faster test suite executions and potentially infinite scale. So we'll use those new Macs, and we'll use Genymotion more, and things are just bound to get much faster. So with that, I'm done. Thank you very much. And I think it's time for Q&A.
Thanks, thanks, Rotem. Could you stop sharing your screen? I'll just
Sure.
Thank you. Awesome. All right, so we've got a couple of questions. I'm gonna read them out to you. All right, so a couple of questions for you, Rotem. So one is, I think early on in your presentation, you mentioned test isolation is a key for stable tests. So one of the questions is around, if a test, sometimes tests become very long, right? If they're kept independent.
And so if you make the test really long, it's also maybe prone to a higher rate of failure, from a UI automation point of view. So how do you balance that? What's your take on independence of tests versus, tests being really long?
Okay, yeah, that's a good question. And I have one example for this. So let's say we want to make sure that our application is, so let's take like tests of, not a test. So let's take a use case of an application that needs to be logged in. Every time I'm starting the application, I need to log in because I'm reinstalling it and it's all fresh. And it doesn't have my credentials inside it. So one of the things that we did is we created some sort of quick login inside the app. We have some sort of service that is exposed only in our test applications. So whenever we run a production application, this module does not exist. But in our test variant, we have some sort of quick login module that is then controlled from the test itself. So we run that, and then we do a quick login to the app, which does everything just in the background, and it doesn't let you go through a login process manually. It just starts up logged in. So that's one solution for that. I know it's kind of an elaborate solution, and but this makes sure that everything is, it's a balance from quite fast and very stable. Although you need to work for this, of course.
Wix decided to build sort of its own automation framework versus
taking
something off the shelf.
You froze up for me for a few minutes, for a few seconds. So if you can go from the beginning, please. Freezing up again. Yeah, you're freezing up for me. I'm not sure if it's me or not.
Give me a sec. I think I have quit everything possible. Let's see. Okay, can you hear me now, Rotem?
Yeah, I do.
Awesome. The question is around what was the reason why Wix decided to build sort of your own automation framework versus going with something off the shelf?
Oh, okay. So I actually written about this quite a lot back in the day, 2017, when we introduced Detox. The fact is that of course, there were projects that run with technologies similar to this, as I mentioned, Espresso and Earl Grey, but those solutions work for native applications mostly. And to run a unified test suite that runs on React Native applications and that takes into account everything that React Native does, does as a framework, its network stack and everything related to its own like modules that just generate everything, because React Native doesn't really run like native applications. They re-implemented a lot of things inside it. So all the animations are things that are re-implemented with React Native. It's not native UI, it's not native animations like running on native applications. It's something quite different. So this is just one example. There are a lot of other examples. So we needed a way to take technologies like Espresso and Earl Grey and make them work with React Native. So React Native themselves used, then they didn't really test with EndtoEnd, but whatever small things that they had was running with what's its name? Forgot. With Appium, and
Sure.
I'm pretty sure they dropped Appium by now, because around 2.5 years ago they adopted Detox, and they test Detox, and they test their own test app with Detox. So React Native tests themselves with Detox.
Got it.
Now the thing was that Appium was just not stable enough for us, for them. We used Appium for quite a bit before, until we decided to go with gray box testing instead of black box, and there was just nothing around for React Native.
Got it. Okay. Okay. Follow-up question. I think this is around Detox. What are the next steps and the deprecation of Earl Grey, and sort of how where do you see all this going?
Okay, so I don't see the full question, but you said the deprecation of Earl Grey. So Earl Grey was deprecated. It's not in the project anymore. Detox 18 was the last step for us removing Earl Grey from Detox. We went into an in-house synchronization mechanism. We call it Detox Sync, which is very, very got a smart name, not. And Detox Sync, not just Detox Sync. We needed to re-implement everything, so synchronization and actions and expectations. So all of those needed to be re-implemented. But the main thing, and the main idea behind getting rid of Earl Grey was to make Detox faster, or at least not faster in the sense that the tests run faster, but in the sense of it takes much less CPU usage. The CPU footprint is close to 1/20th of what we had with Earl Grey, due to the fact that now Detox uses a message-based mechanism instead of polling, instead of asking all the time all the things that it monitors to see if they're idle. Are you idle? Are you idle? It just did that all the time, and now it just waits for a message from those to say, okay, I'm idle. You can go ahead and do whatever you want now. So this is a dramatic improvement in terms not of the single test speed, but in our ability to scale it up and run a lot of tests on the same machine. So we can run 10 emulators instead of 5 emulators right now.
Sure. Awesome. All right. Follow-up question on Detox is around how do you track, or what do you use to track test results from Detox?
Okay, so Jest is quite good with providing reports for test results, and we currently still use TeamCity to get our results, and then we have all the history of all the tests, and it tells us if there is a flaky test or anything similar. But Wix is moving out of the CI system in favor of something new, but still we're pretty much counting on Jest's report solution. We have our own tweaks on that, and our setup asks you to switch something to just use our our module that runs on top of the reporter of Jest. But that's it. I hope I answered the question. I'm not sure. So
no, I think
please tell me if I answered it fine.
No, I think it was mainly around sort of using what are the systems you're using to track the test results, and I think you spoke about Dest and TeamCity. Okay, couple of questions around. I think your goal of zero manual QA. I think the first question is, don't you, again, this is in quotes, don't you feel users will be will kind of lose contact to the test object if you really achieve, the zero manual sort of QA goal? And second follow-up to that is, do you really think it's possible to achieve zero manual QA?
So, okay, so how things are working for us, at least. We have our tests running, which developers write. Most of, at least all the mocked end-to-end tests, and the others, which are not production, are being written by developers. And the other tests are written by developers, but also by our QA engineers. And those QA engineers, that's their job, to make sure that the full production end-to-end test suite that runs whenever someone wants to GA their new change to the module, that it runs fine on the final build of the application. So it is zero manual QA in a sense that if everything passes, then we're good. But those are maintained, like they are maintained in a very strict manner. There are people that's their job to make sure that those test suites are good enough and that they're passing. So lose touch, I don't know, could be, but we're actively maintaining it. So I'm not sure if it's something that we can that we can see. Yeah, I hope it answers.
Got it. And do you think, I think the follow-up question is like, do you think it's really possible to achieve sort of the zero manual QA goal?
Okay. So we've set to ourselves we asked to ourselves, we set ourselves to do that around 3 years ago. And the challenge was that every time we just encountered some new problems. Either it's still flakiness due to some things in Detox or some things in the app. Sometimes we don't really find the source of the flakiness, and or not that we don't find it. It takes a lot of time and effort to do that. And that's why we continuing to improve the reporting mechanism of Detox, because if not for that, it would be very hard to understand, let's say, why the app is not getting idle. For instance, this is something that can drive you crazy if you don't understand. It seems like just the test is stuck, the app is stuck, and nothing really works. But if you go inside the logs and you can understand that there's a hanging network request that was never returned, or an animation that just continues in the background forever and you don't see it on a video, or in a hierarchy dump, because it's just there, but it's on the background. So we continue to improve all our tools and Detox and the visibility of things, and we're trying to make it faster. And every time we have an issue, the biggest pain that we have, we go ahead and try to solve this. So the last biggest pain that we had was the execution time of tests, because we got pretty stable tests, but the execution time was just unbearable. So we went to Genymotion to run tests on their devices, which are much stronger, and give us the ability to run many more devices in parallel. And with iOS, we re-implemented the synchronization mechanism to make sure that we can run more in parallel and run on faster machines. So now we stopped using those Mac Pros, Trashcan Mac Pros from 2013. We'll start use Mac Minis M1s, which are infinitely faster. So those were our problems, I think, and we're just solving them, step by step. It always takes time, and I don't know what would be the next hurdle, the next thing that would get us, that would be like, how do you say it? Anyway, like a big issue for us. But for now, those issues are behind us, and we hope that the next issue will also be solvable. We put a lot of effort in Detox and in finding solutions that are not only good for Wix internally, but also for the open source project as well. We see that first as an open source project, and we understand that the issues that we have, the community also has. So we try to solve it for everyone.
Awesome. All right. So I think, Rotem, we have time for maybe one or two more questions. I think there's one which is very interesting, which I've seen as a recurring question in many talks is, how do you make sure automation keeps up with code changes, right? Product changes that are happening, right? And, how do you keep everything in sync with development and make sure that, automation isn't slowing your releases down because you haven't written the automation test scripts. At the same time, you're getting the right amount of coverage with all the new code and features you're building.
Good. So I think it boils down to two main things. The first is unified configuration. We have a lot of developers. We have more than 100 developers writing code for the Wix app. And we don't want them to fiddle with configuration all the time. So as I mentioned in the talk, we have some sort of unified configuration that is managed by the Detox team. So the Detox team that does changes on the open source project also makes sure that all the configuration gets all the latest features of Detox, all the latest features and all the latest advancements of our configuration baked inside a predefined configuration that is then spread to everyone as a single module. So that's the first thing. The second is we went through a transition in the past year where most of the production end-to-end tests were written by QA engineers, but those are not being written by QA engineers anymore. They're being written by the developers who are working on the products themselves. So whenever there's a big change and they try to run an RC and get those tests running in like production end-to-end tests running, they will get failures. So developers cannot run GA on their module unless those tests are being fixed. If they do product changes, the tests must be aligned to those as well. So this makes sure that we have that those tests are good enough and that they are being actively maintained because they're maintained by those who are making the code changes. But also we have our QA engineers who are working on making sure that those tests are good enough and they're in constant connection or communication with the developers. Yeah, but I think that those two things are probably the most important things.
Awesome. Got it. All right, great. Thanks a lot, Rotem. Thank you for taking the time, to speak to us today. And I think there were some great questions, and I think you did a great job.
Yeah, definitely.